All right, let's dive into one of the most incredible processes on the entire planet, photosynthesis. We're going to break down that exact moment when a plant grabs a beam of sunlight and somehow turns it into pure chemical energy. So, how does a plant eat sunlight? I know, it sounds like a trick question, right? Plants don't have mouths. But in a very real, very amazing way, they do consume light. And the answer to how is just a brilliant story of tiny, tiny machines at work.
Every single second, our sun is blasting out just an unbelievable amount of energy as little packets of light called photons. For most of the universe, that light just zips off into empty space. But for a plant, it's ingredient number one in the recipe for life.
Okay, so if we were to zoom way, way in on a single plant leaf, we'd find millions of tiny little cells. And inside those cells are even tinier engines called chloroplasts. These are the little green factories where all the magic is about to happen. But let's get even more specific, because that's where the action is. Inside each one of those chloroplasts, you've got these stacks of what look like tiny, flattened pancakes called thylakoids. And it's the membrane, the skin of these thylakoids, that's the stage for our entire show today. So that photon has just traveled 93 million miles. It's made it all the way to this thylakoid membrane. Its first stop, a super sophisticated light harvesting antenna. Embedded right there in the membrane are these incredible structures we call photosystems. You can just think of them as these perfectly designed antennas. They're packed with chlorophyll, yep, the stuff that makes plants green, and their whole job is to catch those incoming photons. We're going to be talking about two main characters here, photosystem 2 and photosystem 1. So, bam, a photon of light smacks into a chlorophyll molecule inside photosystem 2. All that light energy gets instantly transferred to an electron, which bumps it up to the super high energy excited state. It's kind of like hitting the bell on one of those strongman games at a carnival. That electron is now totally supercharged and ready to do some work. But hang on a second. Photosystem 2 just lost an electron. It can't keep doing that without running out, right? So the plant does something absolutely genius. It rips a water molecule apart. This split releases oxygen, some protons, and, most importantly, an electron to replace the one that just took off. And get this is where pretty much all the oxygen we breathe comes from. Now that high-energy electron can't just hang around. It's immediately sent off on a journey, kind of like a molecular relay race, that's designed to carefully extract its energy piece by piece. Okay, so let's follow this electron. It starts with that big energy boost from light in photosystem 2. From there, it gets passed down a line of proteins called the electron transport chain. As it hops from one protein to the next, it's doing work. By the time it gets to photosystem 1, it's a little tired, so it gets a second jolt of energy from another photon of light. This re-energized electron then gets handed off to its final destination, a special carrier molecule, creating something called NADPH. You can think of this NADPH molecule as a tiny, fully charged battery, ready to be used later. Now, I mentioned the electron was doing work as it traveled. So what was the whole point of that relay race? Well, it was all about building up a type of stored energy. As that electron moved down the line, the energy it gave off was used to power these tiny little pumps. And these pumps were busy shoving protons, which are just hydrogen ions, from the outside of the thylakoid to the inside. It's kind of like using a bicycle pump to force a ton of air into a tire. You're building up pressure. And this pumping action creates a massive difference. The inside space gets totally packed with protons, a super high concentration. Meanwhile, the outside area, which is called the stroma, has very few. This imbalance is called an electrochemical gradient, and it is a huge source of stored potential energy. So the cell has gone to all this trouble to build up this massive proton gradients. Now what? How does it cash in on all that stored energy? It uses one of the most amazing molecular machines in all of biology. The best way to picture this is to think of all those protons crammed inside the thylakoid as water being held back by a giant dam. You've got all this incredible potential energy just waiting to be unleashed. The cell just needs to open the floodgates. And those floodgates are a protein called APP synthase. The protons, wanting to escape the crowded space, come rushing through this channel. And this flow causes a part of the protein to literally spin around like a water wheel or a turbine.
And that spinning motion is the magic. It provides the physical energy to grab a low-energy molecule, ADP, and jam a phosphate onto it, creating ATP. And ATP is the universal energy currency for all life.
This whole amazing process has a pretty technical sounding name, photophosphorylation. But if you break it down, it's actually simple. Photo means light because that's where the energy came from in the first place. And phosphorylation just means adding a phosphate group to something. So it's literally just using light to add a phosphate. That's it.
So let's just do a quick recap. We started this whole thing with just sunlight and water. And after this whole chain of events, we've now made two super important energy-carrying molecules.
The two big products of these light reactions are ATP and NADPH. ATP is like the cell's version of cash. It can be spent right away to get work done. And NADPH is like a rechargeable battery, carrying around those high-energy electrons to be used in the next step.
And what's so critical to understand is that none of these steps happen by themselves. It's a perfectly coordinated assembly line, from the photosystems catching the light, to the electron relay race, to that final spinning ATP synthase turbine. It's all interconnected, and it's all for one single purpose: to capture the energy from sunlight and lock it away in a stable chemical form.
So the plant now has its energy. It's got its ATP cache and its NADPH batteries all charged up. But this is really only half the story. The ultimate goal isn't just to make energy carriers, it's to build sugar, to build the plant itself. So the really big question is, what is the plant going to do with all this energy? What's it going to buy? Well, that's a story for the next part of photosynthesis. Thanks for joining me.